on this great Tuesday. I was about to say Wednesday. I don't know why, but at any rate, um, it is Tuesday. Tuesday, the 21st of June of the great year 2022. And we have news. One moment, please. I'm actually making an adjustment here. Uh, we have news from Tony Buzbee's camp. Tony Buzbee is the famed Houston super lawyer and best known for his participation in the BP oil spill, filing a class action lawsuit. Tony Buzbee is a class action lawsuit legal expert. And that's how you have to think about what Tony Buzbee does. And it's in that spirit that I discuss the news that Tony Buzbee released regarding Deshaun Watson and the multiple lawsuits that Tony filed primarily on behalf of a Houston massage therapist who is licensed named Ashley Solis. And I'm going to talk about this again. I'm not going to talk about this very long because, among other things, the capital hearings are on. And I want to hear more of that so I can talk to you about that. But I digress. I do think it's very important to take a look at what Tony Buzbee has written and put out and discuss it in the proper context. Question, because I have a lot of questions that I'm pretty certain Tony is probably not even going to bother addressing since the lawsuit is settled and he's off having a good time with his Texas A&M buddies and spending time with his wife and all the other things that Tony does to enjoy his life, right? But there are others who are impacted here, and not the people that you would think, okay? I'm going to start off by reading what Tony Buzbee has put out, which has been posted on Twitter. It wasn't, and I note this on Tony Buzbee's Instagram page. And I note that with effect because commonly in this case, when Tony had something to say or inform regarding the progress of his lawsuit against Deshaun Watson, he'd start there. This time he didn't. But according to what Ian Rappaport, who is the NFL Network's designated media release person, as I call him, this is the statement that Tony Buzbee posted. Quote, the cases against Deshaun Watson started with one phone call from one brave, one and strong woman. That woman was Ashley Solis. At the time of that call, she was just one of the hundreds of calls seeking legal assistance that our firm gets weekly. Even though she was originally turned away by our screening process, my staff insisted that I personally speak with her. I'm glad she persisted. Once we took a second look, and after having contact with Watson's original lawyer, who disrespected Ashley and her profession and who arrogantly minimized the conduct of someone he referred to as an, quote, asset, unquote, I was, hold on a second. I'm upstairs. Yeah, I'm upstairs live. I'm live right now. I'm live. I'll be down. I'm live. So at any rate, I probably should have shut that door, huh? But whatever, things happen, okay? And where was I? Oh, even though, and yes, this is my office first, not a bedroom. This is the office. This is the office, okay? All right. All right. Welcome to my office. As I was saying, and to repeat what Tony has written here, even though she was originally turned away by our screening process, this is what Tony has written. My staff insisted that I personally speak with her. I'm glad she persisted. Once we took a second look, and after having contact with Watson's original lawyer who disrespected Ashley and her profession, and who arrogantly minimized the conduct of someone he referred to as an, quote, asset, unquote, I was convinced that our law firm should try to help her. It goes on. As a result of Ashley's lone but brave voice, soon many women who had allegedly experienced the same conduct were emboldened to step forward. I'm incredibly proud to represent them all. They have endured vile criticism and fanatical ignorance. They faced withering cross-examination by skilled litigators and stood firm. They are warriors all. Today, we have an important announcement about these cases, but it is important to point out that without Ashley Solis, the conduct experienced by these women would likely have continued unfettered. The truth is, without her courage and willingness to come forward, the NFL wouldn't currently be contemplating discipline. There would be no examination of how teams might knowingly or unknowingly enable certain behavior. Sports teams wouldn't be reviewing their personnel screening processes, and this important story would not have dominated the sports headlines for more than a year. It goes on here. Today, I announced that all cases against Deshaun Watson, with the exception of 4, have settled. We are working through the paperwork related to those settlements. Once we have done so, those particular cases will be dismissed. The terms and amounts of the settlements are confidential. We won't comment further on the settlements or those cases. As stated, Ashley Solis is one of the heroes of this story. Her case has not settled, and thus her story and that of the other 3 brave women will continue. I look forward to trying these cases in due course, consistent with other docket obligations and the court schedule. Tony Buzbee. Now, that says a lot. And to me, it says this. First of all, regular viewers of my channel and regular readers of Oakland News Now blog.com know that I said that 60% of the original 22 lawsuits that Tony filed were fake. And I went into great detail to explain why. For example, a number of them couldn't list a specific date or venue or time. And the names connected with them, where Busby said that these women were massage therapists, when I put that name in the Texas license database to find that indeed they were massage therapists, they were not. Ashley Solis is a licensed massage therapist and has been for quite some time. So I find it interesting that the very cases I thought would be settled, amongst them Ashley Solis's, were not. And the very cases that were fake were. And the reason for that lay in the definition of one word: settled. Because the layperson thinks to settle a case automatically means that a lot of money was changed hands and Deshaun wound up spending a ton of dough. But that's not what it means to settle a case. To settle a case simply means to dismiss it before it goes to trial. For whatever reason. For whatever reason. And based on what Tony wrote here, we're not going to know that reason. We just know that they were settled. But considering that Ashley's argument is still alive and that she is an actual massage therapist, tells me the following. First of all, that Deshaun Watson's camp elected to fight the cases they knew were real and where consensual sex did occur. And that Tony agreed to admit that, and I'm just speculating, that the other cases were less than kosher and difficult to prove and argue, and would spend a lot of time trying to do so. And so decided to broom those cases, but did so after receiving an attorney's fee. So the person that came out whole in all this, I believe, my opinion, was really Tony Buzbee, less so his clients. I also believe this happened because of something that Deshaun Watson wrote on his Instagram page roughly 3 weeks ago. And I will now reveal that Tony Buzbee did say to me last week, would you report that? And I have to say this, even though we have private conversations, this is one aspect of our private conversations I have to reveal. And no, Tony Buzbee is not my best friend or anything. I reached out to him, and he was kind of to reach back because I want Tony as the person to represent us in our lawsuit against Bank of America regarding PPP loans. I think Tony does a brilliant job as a class action lawyer. That does not mean I agree with every case he takes on or what he does within it. This is one of them. But I digress. What Tony asked me is, he said, if Deshaun Watson settled, would you report it? And I said, I run a media company. Of course, that's what I do. That's what I'm doing. But right then and there, I should have known, and I did know, that he was at work at coming up with a settlement. But just prior to that week, okay, just prior to that week, Deshaun Watson posted on his Instagram account, basically in so many words that, well, this is what he said. This is what he wrote. And he wrote it from what looks like a seat on a private plane that undoubtedly he owns. I can barely get peace, hardly. And he writes peace in a capital letter, hardly in a capital letter. Talk like they all in, I see. All these people just want to scheme. I just want to be for love. Okay, this is what, and I'll show you what he wrote. It's right here. Okay, and there he is. Okay, and there it is. All right, I can barely get peace, hardly. Talk like they all in, I see. All these people just want to scheme. I just want to be for love. All right, now what he means, and there he is. Okay, and there he is, sitting on some sort of stoop or something. But what I believe this means is quite simply that you could look at his face and tell he's tired and sad. Plus, he is now very, very rich. And so I think that Deshaun decided that he had enough money to get Tony Buzbee out of his way and move on with his life. But that he believes that whatever went on with Ashley and the other 4 women wasn't what they say. And I remind everybody that Tony Buzbee approached Watson with a demand for $100,000 settlement roughly a year ago. They declined. Now, I also believe he did this, Deshaun did, because he probably had some, and this is me talking again, my speculation, some issues with how Rusty Hardin handled the case. Rusty Hardin and Mary Flood was legal assistant, they didn't do Deshaun any favors. They don't understand the social media landscape within which we live. And because they don't understand it, they did very little to get control of it. Now, they would argue, what do you mean we had a press conference? But they didn't have dedicated video blogs about updates. They didn't have a ready effort to respond to anything Tony Busby did. They didn't have an Instagram presence. Tony Busby did. They were simply not aggressive in protecting Deshaun Watson in media. And Mary Flood in particular completely failed at it. And I say that because she's supposedly the legal consultant for Rusty Hardin. And of course, then there was Rusty's famous happy ending statement, which he didn't do. And Rusty seemed, for some particular reason, Jack Bull determined to mention that having consensual sex is okay, when that's not the point of it. What Rusty Hardin should have done is emphasized, among other things, Vanessa Boucher's work, TCU professor, on the vast number of unlicensed massage therapists active in Houston who are really there because, well, they're prostitutes, because they're illegal aliens, because perhaps they're involved with some type of criminal organization. That's what Ms. Boucher's 2015 study revealed. That study and she should have been front and center in this entire discussion. I tried to make it so. The professor did not want to, by her email to me, be involved in it. I put her name out there because she wrote the study, A, and B, I felt it was extremely irresponsible on her part to put her head in the sand. I said to her that it's important for her to be involved because of what she reported, also because of the number of black men who were falsely accused of things. And Deshaun Watson does rest as that individual here, someone falsely accused. The reality, the cold reality here, is he had different massage therapists he saw, which is not uncommon for athletes to do. There is actually a lawyer out of Cleveland, Ohio, who will attest to that and who has said that on Twitter. He had written that. He didn't say, he wrote that on Twitter in Ohio. Peter has wrote that on Twitter. Okay? And he stands by that. There are other people with the Texans, and this gets me to Ginny Ventris writing both at Sports Illustrated and the New York Times, my other issue with this whole thing. Because Ginny, by the way, the gentleman I'm referring to, his name is Peter Patakos. He's a lawyer out of Cleveland, Peter Patakos, who, so he says he's a lawyer for the people, fighting corruption and defending civil rights in Ohio's state and federal courts. That's what he does. But he and I had an exchange on Twitter, and it started because he wrote a multi-panel critique of the Deshaun Watson case, which is very critical of Tony Buzbee's approach and very illuminating regarding the facts about sports athletes and what they do, particularly with respect to massage therapists. Okay? In fact, I think it's worth repeating what he said as I'm talking with you about this, okay? And what he wrote was, this is first of all his reaction to Tony Buzbee's statement that I just read to you. Peter writes this on Twitter 6 hours ago. Tony Buzbee, whose statement below is absurd, knew he couldn't keep his charade up much longer. These settlements will go a long way to restoring normalcy for Watson, who's already endured far more punishment than warranted, even if his accuser's allegations were 100% true. And then he goes on, he said, here's a thread of threads with links to columns at Cleveland Frowns, fully analyzing Tony Buzbee's lawsuits against Deshaun Watson. While opinions on the story may well differ, it's undeniable that the corporate press coverage omits many critical facts, something I pointed out for quite some time, okay? And he says, okay, so here's a take on Watson, innocent until proven guilty, and the Browns having signed the superstar quarterback who has been sued by 22 women, which they really weren't, but cleared by a grand jury for alleged sexual assault. And he says, First, this is absolutely not to excuse any grown adult for allowing their sense of well-being to rise or fall with the fortunes of the Cleveland Browns. He says, second, of course, countless crimes go unpunished in this country. But then he goes on, he says, but about the 22 ladies who sued Watson for having sexually assaulted them, folks should consider not only that a grand jury refused to indict Watson based on these accusations and whatever evidence there was to support them. He said this is remarkable in itself because sexual assault cases where more than one alleged victim is accusing the defendant of the same thing are generally considered to be low-hanging fruit for prosecutors. In other words, something that it's easy for a prosecutor to say, okay, that person did it, and, judge, here's a suggested punishment, okay? But Peter goes on to explain, he says, but even more remarkable about these accusations is their timing. In the wake of a flood press over Watson wanting to force his way out of Houston, based on at least part of the increasingly prevalent perception the Texans owners are racist. Despite Watson had several years left on what was at the time one of the most lucrative deals ever given to a quarterback, it is well documented that most of the Texans locker room, among others, was enraged in 2018 when then owner, now deceased Bob McNair, doubled down on his criticism of black players, taking a knee for social justice by saying that he can't have the inmates running the prison. By 2018, McNair already had a questionable history of racially insensitive comments, as this 2017 report from a Columbia, South Carolina paper put it, which I'm not going to show for this reason. I will say that Bob McNair has always been a friend to me. As a person who's covered the NFL media under my own Zenny 60 Media brand and now corporation, I can't share these points of view about Bob McNair, but I will continue. Peter says, and Watson was also upset in January of 2021 that the Texans didn't hire one of the two qualified black men who were identified as the two best candidates by a search firm the Texans hired to help fill their GM candidacy. He says it wasn't until there are weeks of headlines about Watson wanting out of Houston that the first of the sexual assault accusations surfaced, all brought by women represented by the same lawyer, Tony Buzbee, who is neighbors with current Texans owner Cal McNair. It's bad enough for the NFL plantation, as he calls it, when star college quarterbacks like John Elway or Eli Manning refuse to sign with teams that draft them. So imagine how the McNairs feel about a young black superstar quarterback already beloved in Houston after having played there for years, leveraging his star power to force his way out of town after having just signed a pricey contract extension, and worse, because they're racist. So racist that Watson could no longer stand playing for them anymore and would risk the mess of forcing his way out of a lucrative multi-year contract extension. This was a colossal business and public relations crisis for the McNairs that conveniently happened to evaporate as the sensational accusations against Watson surfaced. So all of a sudden, we're supposed to believe that this man, who always displayed high character and rising to stardom as an NFL quarterback, and is one of the last men on earth who need to pay for sex or otherwise force his way into such a situation, it was a sex-crazed brute who assaulted women. He wasn't. All right. Never mind also that the sex-crazed black brute, as they're trying to paint him, is a well-worn racist trope. I can't say that Watson is innocent, Peter writes, and it seems very doubtful that solid proof will ever come out affirming one way or the other. He says, and this being the Browns, I of course can't say I expect his tenure in Cleveland to end anything but a heretofore and unfathomable conflagration of disappointment and despair. But the folks saying that they won't root for the Browns anymore just because they signed a quarterback who's been sued by 22 women, but cleared by a grand jury for alleged sexual assault, should at least consider the extremely suspect timing and circumstances of these allegations. Okay, and then he goes on quite extensively, but he also had written quite forcefully about this, and I'll break off from here and explain to myself my own feeling about this. The corporate media used this to try to squeeze whatever money it could in the form of clicks for advertisements and page views, um, by posting accounts from the lawsuit that were so salacious that they should have been rated R at the very least. They were not. There's no such rating system online. There should be. There was no such rating system on Twitter, where Twitter should have a rating system, but it wasn't there. And so they would publish these whole again and again and again. And then there's Jenny Ventris, who reported on this for Sports Illustrated and then went to the New York Times and basically reported the same thing. The same thing. But didn't report that she came from the New York Times, excuse me, from Sports Illustrated, and went to the New York Times on the 28th of December of last year and brought her coverage with her. She didn't then tell us where her coverage ended with Sports Illustrated and where it picked up with the Times. She made it look like she'd done this stuff brand new with the Times and said nothing about her tenure with Sports Illustrated, and that is unethical. Okay? Also, equally unethical are the role of her editors. Why didn't they post that? There's some people have this idea that when someone writes for a publication, they run it. They don't. Jenny is an employee of the New York Times, just as she was an employee of Sports Illustrated. I believe what was Time Warner, whoever owns it now. It's not Time Warner. Okay? But what she did covered 2 publications and therefore a good set of the acreage that was created around this in the form of words written by news organizations. She got 2 bites of the apple, and yet no one except me pointed that out. That's wrong. Beyond wrong. And then there's Pro Football Talk, which spent a lot of time, I argue, inordinate amount of time, trying to make Deshaun Watson look bad in such a way that I asked the question 3 times, actually 4 times, are you paid by Tony Buzbee? Because it looked like they were. Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk based his business around chronicling the arrest of black NFL players. His focus on black players and black folks was so negative and frequent that at one point in 2007, he posted a photograph of the character that Isaac Hayes voiced in South Park, Chef, I believe, all black with except his eyes. I personally wrote an email to Mike to take that down. He eventually did. Okay? I have nothing personally against Mike Florio except this cant toward racism. And he covers enough of the league in a standard normal way where he, okay, gets away with what he used to do as a matter of course. But the fact of the matter is he did used to do it. And the fact of the matter is in this instance, he gave little focus to the possibility that Deshaun may very well be innocent, let alone what black men go through being falsely accused. The same is true for Chris Sims with respect to Jameis Winston. He would come up with the nuttiest takes on Jameis Winston regarding performance that said nothing about how great a passer he is, and says nothing about it. And you will wonder why. Well, because he's black and an excellent quarterback, but he was accused of doing something with a white woman that he didn't do. And was never even saw a court regarding it. Okay? Ever. But, hey, there's a difference between how Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston are treated by the mostly white press, like 70% sports press, and someone like Ben Roethlisberger, who even when he was going through his allegations, didn't see the kind of vitriol from the press that black players have seen. I should say the white press, because the point has to be underscored that it is a tragedy and a shame and a crime that more African Americans don't own media organizations. I don't care if you have a company, you don't run something else. Have part ownership in something like, hey, Zenny 62 Media, looking for investors. But to allow this tableau to exist is wrong. The uncharted territory is a black perspective on a story, or an Asian perspective, or a Hispanic perspective. The point is, we all have different points of view. If someone says black press now, the white point of view that people are used to, even black folks, is let that person speak about a black story or black problem, or write about a black story or black problem, as opposed to how they might view a story from their lens, being an African American person, or Latino, or Asian, or Jewish, or Italian. You see what I'm getting at? Or Portuguese. And go on and on and on. We all have points of view, Filipino, for example, that are informed by our unique backgrounds. And you have to respect where people came from and who they are and how they are molded and shaped. You have to want to know their stories. In fact, it's really a crime to just push people as being, black or white or something like that, as opposed to Colombian. You ever danced a Colombian dance over Colombian dinner? It's fun. So my point is, we have a lot of growing to do about this. The Watson case doesn't help it at all. And I don't know that the women that Tony Busby thought or wanted to act like he came to the rescue or be heroes too, can really be described in that way. In fact, it looks like they're never ever going to see the kind of relief they want. And Tony Busby made it pretty much clear in his statement that he's not going to really spend a lot of time trying to get it. After all, he's whole. More on this later. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. Oh, and there's one thing I want to say. Something. There's a lot of statements about believe women when they say something. Believe anyone who's really telling the truth. But don't believe them just because they are something. That opens up the floodgates for people to do one thing: lie. Okay? People will lie, and there are women who will take advantage of a situation where they believe you're supposed to believe them just because. There are bad people in this world. You do not open the door to bad people because you're trying to achieve justice for women who have been harmed. I understand that, but that's the wrong way to go. The right way to go is to look at each and every case with a fine-tooth comb. No assumptions. We live in what I call the assumptive society. People assume they know a certain thing, and they don't study. Look at how the Watson case was handled. It has been handled. No. Study, look, read, ask questions. Sometimes ask questions that you don't even want to hear the answer to. Now I'll say this. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com.